It was supposed to be a routine voyage. I've been a deckhand for years and nothing really surprises me anymore. Not the storms, the mechanical failures, or the long, lonely nights at sea. But this trip was different from the start. We set sail from a small port in the North Atlantic, bound for Iceland. The weather was fair, the sea calm, but there was a strange unease among the crew. Something none of us could quite put our finger on. The captain, a no-nonsense man with a thick beard and gruff demeanor, dismissed it as nerves. "Nothing out here but fish and water," he'd say, laughing it off. But as the days went on, the feeling of unease only grew stronger. The first signs that something was wrong came on the third night. I was on night watch. The ship quiet except for the gentle creak of the hull and the rhythmic hum of the engines. The moon was high, casting a silver glow over the water, and everything seemed normal until I heard the splash. It wasn't the kind of splash you'd expect from a wave or a piece of debris hitting the water. It was deliberate, like something large had slipped into the ocean just off of our starboard side. I leaned over the railing, squinting into the darkness, but all I saw was the endless expanse of black water, rippling slightly under the moonlight. I radioed the bridge, but no one had seen or heard anything unusual. The captain told me to keep an eye out, but not to worry. So I went back to my post, trying to shake off the creepy dread that had settled in my gut. The next morning, one of the crew was missing. It was Anton, a seasoned sailor who'd been with us for years. His bunk was empty, his gear untouched. We searched the ship from top to bottom, but there was no sign of him. The captain insisted he must have fallen overboard during the night, but something about that explanation didn't sit right with me. I knew Anton. Anton was careful, almost paranoid about his safety. He wouldn't just fall in, and even if he did, surely we would have heard some type of scream or noise. That night I was on watch again, my nerves on edge. The sea was too quiet, the ship's movements too smooth, like we were gliding over glass. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that something was out there, lurking just beyond the edge of the light. Then I heard it, a soft scraping sound like nails on metal, coming from below the deck. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it sent a chill down my spine. I gripped my flashlight and made my way down into the bowels of the ship, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound led me to the cargo hold, a cavernous space filled with crates and equipment. The air was thick and musty, the only light coming from a narrow beam of my flashlight. The scraping stopped as soon as I entered the room, and the silence that followed was so complete that I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. I moved slowly through the hold, my light sweeping across the crates. There was nothing out of place. Just as I was about to turn back, I caught a glimpse of something, a shadow, small and quick, darting behind the crates. I froze, every muscle in my body tensed. "Anton?" I whispered. Though I knew it was foolish, there was no answer, only the oppressive silence. I crept closer, my breath shallow, and rounded the corner. The space behind the crates was empty, no sign of movement, no trace of the shadow I'd seen, but there was something else, something that made my blood run cold. A wet, slithering trail on the floor, leading deeper into the ship. I didn't follow it. I ran back to the deck, my heart racing. I reported what I'd seen to the captain. He looked at me like I was crazy, but I could see the fear in his eyes too. He ordered the crew to stay vigilant, but there was nothing more we could do. We were in the middle of the ocean, trapped with whatever had come aboard. The next morning, we discovered that the radio had been smashed to bits. Not just damaged, but completely destroyed, as if something or someone had torn it apart with savage force. The wires were shredded, the casing shattered, and the transmitter was beyond repair. We were completely cut off, unable to call for help. The captain swore under his breath, his face pale with anger and fear. "What the hell is going on?" he muttered, but none of us had an answer. By the fourth night, another crew member was missing. Jacob, the engineer. He was supposed to be on duty in the engine room, but when we went to check on him, all we found was his tool belt lying on the floor. The tools scattered as if he dropped them in a hurry. The engine itself had been tampered with, valves loosened, bolts unscrewed, fuel lines cut. It was clear that whatever was on the ship, it was intelligent, and it was systematically cutting off our means of escape. The captain ordered us to stay together from that point on, not letting anyone out of sight, but it didn't matter. The next night it took Sam. We were all in the galley, eating in tense silence, when he got up to use the head. He was gone for less than 5 minutes, but when we went to check on him, there was nothing left. No trace, no sign of struggle, just the same wet, slithering trail leading down the hall away from the doorway. By this point, the fear was palpable. We were down to 4, me, the captain, and 2 others. No one slept, no one spoke. We just sat in the bridge, huddled together with the door locked. The lights on, and weapons in hand. But the ship was unnervingly quiet. The only sound, the steady thump of the engines, barely audible over the pounding of our own hearts. Then, in the dead of night, the lights flickered and went out. The emergency lighting kicked in, casting the room into a dim red glow that made everything feel even more surreal and terrifying. The captain cursed, grabbed a flashlight, and motioned for us to stay put. He was going to check the fuse box. We begged him not to go alone, but he insisted. "We can't just sit here in the dark," he said, his voice trembling. We waited, the 3 of us, in that eerie red light, every second feeling like an eternity. I strained to listen, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The captain didn't come back. "Should we go look for him?" one of the others whispered. But before I could answer, we heard it, the scraping sound, like nails on metal, coming from just outside the door. We froze, our eyes locked on the door, knowing that whatever was out there had come for us. The handle slowly turned, the door creaking open with a groan, and I saw it. The creature slipping inside. It was small, barely 3 feet tall, with slick, wet skin that glistened in the dim red light. Its body was twisted, unnatural, with too many joints bending the wrong way. Its eyes, large, black, and devoid of any emotion, locked onto ours, and I felt a cold, primal fear take hold of me. It moved slowly, deliberately, its clawed hands scraping the floor as it advanced. One of the others, the youngest, barely out of his teens, let out a strangled cry and lunged at it with a wrench, but the creature was too fast. It dodged to the side, its movements disturbingly fluid. The wrench clanged uselessly against the floor. The boy stumbled, and before he could recover, the creature was on him. But instead of attacking, it merely placed a hand on his chest. The boy froze, his eyes wide with horror, and then he simply vanished, gone as if he had never been there at all. The other crewman and I backed away, our minds reeling from what we had just seen. The creature turned on us, its black eyes glinting in the dim light, and I knew we were next. It was playing with us, savoring our fear. The other man panicked. He threw open the door and ran, bolting down the corridor. I heard his footsteps echoing through the ship, growing faster and fainter until there was nothing but silence. The creature didn't chase him. It just stood there, watching me, its head tilting slightly, as if it was curious. I backed into the corner of the room, my heart hammering in my chest. I had no weapon, no way out. I was alone, trapped and at its mercy. It took a step towards me, then another. moving with the same eerie grace. I could hear my breath coming in ragged gasps, could feel the cold sweat dripping down my back. The creature stopped just a foot away, its eyes locked on me, and for a moment it simply stared at me, as if it was deciding what to do next. And then, slowly, it reached out. I flinched, expecting the same fate as the others, but instead, its claws brushed against my cheek, cold and slimy. The touch sent a shock of fear through me, but I didn't move. I couldn't. I was paralyzed, caught in those dark, endless eyes. The creature leaned in closer, its breath cold against my skin, and whispered something in a language I couldn't understand. The words were soft, almost soothing, but they filled me with a dread so deep I thought I might suffocate. And then, just as it had appeared, it pulled away. It turned and slithered out of the room, disappearing into the shadows of the ship, leaving me alone in the dark, my mind spinning with what had just happened. I don't know how long I sat there, huddled in the corner, waiting for it to come back, but it never did. When dawn finally broke, I ventured out, my legs shaking with every step. The ship was eerily quiet, the corridors empty, the air heavy with the scent of salt and fear. I found the captain's body in the engine room, his eyes wide open, his face twisted in terror. There was no sign of the others, no bodies, no blood, nothing. Just the same wet, slithering trail leading back to the cargo hold. I knew then that I was the last one left. The ship was adrift, the engines dead, the radio destroyed. I was alone in the middle of the ocean, with no hope of rescue and no way to escape. But worse than that, I knew the creature was still out there, somewhere in the bowels of the ship, waiting. And sooner or later, it would come for me, just as it had for the others. And when it did, there would be no one left to hear my scream. We were about 2 weeks into a research expedition in the North Atlantic, mapping the ocean floor with cutting-edge sonar technology. It was a big deal for our team. Funding was tight, and this was supposed to be our breakthrough. The weather had been rough from the start, with storms rolling in faster than we could track them. But we pressed on. There was something out here, something we needed to find. Or at least that's what our lead scientist, Dr. Harper, insisted. The tension on board had been mounting as the days went by with little to show for our efforts. The crew was on edge, exhausted from the constant battle with the elements and the long, sleepless nights. But it wasn't just the weather, it was something else. Something unspoken that gnawed at all of us. It was like the ocean was waiting for something. It all started the night we reached what Dr. Harper called the Abysmal Zone. It was an area of the ocean that had never been properly mapped before. A deep trench that descended into the darkness so profoundly that our equipment struggled to keep up. The sea was eerily calm, a stark contrast to the storms we had faced earlier. The sky was clear, but there was no moon, only a blanket of stars reflecting on the inky black water. We dropped the sonar equipment overboard, letting it sink slowly into the abyss. The readings were strange from the start, deep, irregular pulses that didn't match anything we'd seen before. The ocean floor was uneven, with jagged formations that seemed almost unnatural. But it wasn't until the equipment hit the 10,000 foot mark that things really started to get weird. The sonar picked up something large. Massive, actually. Moving deep within the trench. At first, we thought it was a glitch, maybe a school of fish or a whale passing through. But as we watched the screen, it became clear that it was something else entirely. The shape was too large, too defined, and it moved with a slow, deliberate grace that sent shivers down my spine. "Are you seeing this?" I asked Dr. Harper, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, his face pale. "I've never seen anything like this," he said, his eyes glued to the monitor. "This could be the discovery of a lifetime." The shape continued to move, circling the trench as if it were aware of our presence. The sonar couldn't get a clear reading, but whatever it was enormous, larger than any known sea creature. The tension on the bridge was palpable as we watched, waiting for it to reveal itself. And then, without warning, the sonar feed cut out. The screen went black, the equipment below us going silent. "What the hell?" one of the technicians muttered, frantically checking the connections. "We've lost the feed." Dr. Harper ordered us to reel in the equipment, but the winch jammed, refusing to budge. It was as if something was holding it down, keeping it in the depths. The crew scrambled to fix it, but no matter what we did, the cable remained taut, straining against the weight of whatever was down there. Then we heard it, a low, resonant sound, like a whale's song, but deeper, more haunting. It reverberated through the ship, making the metal hull vibrate and setting our teeth on edge. The sound wasn't just coming from the ocean, it was inside of our heads, a deep, primal call that filled me with inexplicable dread. The crew froze, listening in a horrified silence as the sound grew louder, more insistent. It was like a voice, ancient and powerful, calling out from the depths of the abyss. I couldn't understand the words, if they were words at all, but the meaning was clear. It was a summons, a demand to descend into the darkness. Dr. Harper was the first to snap out of it. "Cut the cable," he ordered, his voice trembling. "We need to get out of here now." But the winch wouldn't release. The mechanism locked in place, as if it were welded shut. The ship lurched suddenly, the bow dipping as something heavy pulled at the sonar cable, dragging us down. The sound grew louder, more urgent, filling my mind with images of black water and endless void, of something ancient and hungry waiting in the darkness. The ship's engines roared to life as the captain ordered full power, trying to pull us away from whatever had us in its grip. But the more we fought, the harder the pull became, dragging us further into the trench. The ocean around us churned, the calm surface breaking into violent waves and slamming against the hull. And then we saw it, just for a moment, a glimpse of something massive rising from the depths. The water bulged and foamed as a dark shape, impossibly large, broke the surface. It was covered in slick, black skin that glistened in the starlight, its form shifting and writhing as if it were made of the shadows. There were no eyes that I could see, but I felt its gaze, cold and piercing, as it looked up at us. The sound grew unbearable, a deafening roar that shook the ship and made my head throb with pain. The crew was in a frenzy, shouting and scrambling to cut the cable to get us free, but it was too late. The ship was being pulled down, dragged into the abyss by the weight of the creature below. I don't remember much after that, just flashes of chaos. The ship tilting as the water rushed in, the lights flickering and going out. I remember the cold, the suffocating darkness, and the feeling of being watched, of something waiting just beyond the edge of sight. When I woke up, I was floating in a life raft. The remnants of the ship scattered around me. The sky was gray, the sea calm once more, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. I could still hear the faint echoes of that call. Deep in my mind, a reminder of what lay beneath the surface. The rescue team found me later that day. the sole survivor of what they called a freak accident. But I know the truth. The ocean is vast, and we've barely scratched the surface of its secrets. There are things down there, ancient things, that don't want to be found. And when they call, you can only hope that you're not the one who answers. Every time I close my eyes, I see that dark shape rising from the depths. Feel the pull of the abyss calling me back. I know it's down there, waiting. And I know that one day it will call to me again. I've always had a deep love for the sea. The endless horizon, the salt in the air, the mysteries lurking beneath the waves. It's what led me to become a marine researcher. So, when Narrator picked up an uncharted shipwreck, I felt a thrill of excitement. There were no records of it, no name, just a strange blip on the screen in the middle of nowhere. First time I saw it, I felt my heart skip a beat. The ship appeared suddenly out of the fog, a massive shadow looming against the overcast sky. It was an old cargo ship, rusted and decrepit. Yet somehow it seemed untouched by time. No barnacles clung to its hull, no signs of decay beyond the rust. It was just as if the ocean itself had forsaken it. Even stranger, there was no nameplate on the ship's stern, just an empty space where letters should have been. I was the first to suggest we board it. Curiosity and the need to document whatever this was drove me forward. My colleagues were hesitant, but the allure of the unknown was just too strong for all of us. As we approached in our small motorboat, the ship seemed to grow larger, towering over us like some ancient leviathan. The air felt colder the closer we got, and I swear the water around the ship seemed darker, almost black, as if it were poisoned by its presence. When we finally climbed up the side and stepped onto the deck, a deep sense of unease settled over me. The ship was eerily silent, the kind of silence that presses in on you, thick and oppressive. The deck was slick with moisture, the wood beneath my boots creaking with every step. But it wasn't the sound of old wood, it was something else, something almost alive. We split up to cover more ground, each of us drawn to different parts of the ship. And I chose to explore the bridge, thinking I might find some clues as to what had happened here. The stairs leading up creaked loudly, the sound echoing through the ship's corridors. As I reached the top, the door of the bridge was slightly ajar, as if someone had left in a hurry. I pushed it open, and the hinges groaned in protest. The bridge was surprisingly intact, but it was covered in a fine layer of dust, as if no one had set foot in there in years. The controls were old, outdated even for when the ship might have been sailed. Charts were strewn across the table, their ink faded and unreadable. But the strangest thing was the chair. It was turned away from the controls, facing the door. It felt like someone or something had been sitting there, watching, waiting for someone to come in. I moved closer, my footsteps unnervingly loud in the quiet. The chair was empty, of course, but it was positioned in such a way that sent a chill down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something was lurking just out of sight. I tried to focus, to find some kind of logbook or record, but there was nothing. It was as if the crew had vanished into thin air, as if the ship didn't exist. As I turned to leave, I noticed something in the corner of the room. A mirror, standing tall and strangely out of place. Its surface was covered in grime, but I could still make out my own reflection. But there was something wrong. My reflection was there, but it didn't move with me. It just stared, unblinking, its eyes dark and hollow. I stumbled back, my heart racing. The mirror, it was impossible, but I could feel it. The cold dread washed over me. The sense that the ship was not empty, not really. Whatever had happened here, whatever had claimed the ship, it was still here, watching, waiting. I ran back to the deck, desperate to find my colleagues and get off this cursed vessel. But the ship had changed. The corridor seemed longer, darker, the walls closing in on me. I could hear faint whispers, too low to make out. But they were there, coming from everywhere, and nowhere all at once. When I finally burst onto the deck, I found the others waiting, their faces pale, eyes wide with the same fear that gripped me. No one spoke. We didn't need to. We all felt it. The ship was alive, and it did not want us there. We hurried back to the motorboat, our movements frantic and uncoordinated. As we pushed off from the ship, the fog thickened, swallowing it whole. I looked back one last time, and there, standing on the deck, was a figure. Tall, shadowy, its features indistinguishable in the fog. It watched us as we sped away, its form growing smaller and smaller until it vanished into the mist. We never spoke about what happened on that ship. We never reported it, never returned. But sometimes, late at night when the sea is calm, I see it in my mind. The ship, looming out of the fog, waiting for its next victims. And I wonder if, somewhere out there, it still drifts. Ghost ship, lost to time, carrying with all of its souls of the damned.